Hi, my name is Charlie Sipe, and I'm doing a quick summary of the article written by Rockness and Rockness called Navigating the Complex Maze of Ethics CPE. So, just a little bit of background about the article. Um, the authors talk about the need for ethics among practicing CPAs. Um, they talk briefly about the frauds that instituted widespread requirements for ethics among practicing CPAs. And they talk about how the ethics CPE requirements are confusing and they lack the ethics foundation that's prescribed by a lot of the legislation brought forward from the frauds. And they also touch on the different requirements across the 50 states, Washington, D.C., and the three U.S. territories. So the need for ethics education was brought about by the Tradeway Commission first in 1987. Um, that's also at the time that COSO was formed and instituted the audit of internal controls for issuing clients. Many frauds after internet technology bubble burst called for an improvement of the ethical climate, and a lot of the frauds that it talked about were such as Enron and WorldCom. So, with the implementation of Sarbanes-Oxley, the PCAOB, and stronger SEC regulation, um, it placed great emphasis on ethical failures. In 2008 and 9, the financial crisis renewed and reinforced demands for ensuring integrity and ethics in the accounting profession because people had lost faith in what accountants do due to a lot of the frauds that happened, causing them to lose their homes. So the authors go on to talk about ethics educations and rules, and so what they say is ethics education must provide a context for ethical decision making, and basically what they're trying to say is that ethics education can't really tell you what decision you need to make, but it needs to give you a good background for you to make your own decision. Um, they also go on to say when focused solely on rules, accountants may lose sight of moral implications. And I think what they're alluding to there is how accountants are very black and white, and they don't see the gray in most situations. So they appreciate rules more than having to actually make a contextual decision, um, and so it makes it harder for accountants to make a moral decision and ethical dilemma. And then a quote from the article: true accounting ethics education focuses on the moral decisions that are intricately tied to accounting choices and the underlying principles which support the accounting rules as well as the codes of professional conduct. So they go on to talk about the current state ethics education requirements. Like I touched on earlier, there's a lot of different um, requirements among the states. So they list the 7 basic principles for each state's ethics requirements. And so, as they're listed here, requirements for ethics education prior to initial licensure, requirements for ethics education for renewal or as part of CPE requirements, the amount of ethics education required each licensing period, the length of the licensing period, the required content of the ethics education, the required qualifications of the instructor, if any, and requirements for multi-state reciprocity or licensing. And then they kind of list out a lot of the different states' requirements and how they're different. And it gives an example of a CPA with multi-state practice. So they touch on that it's a problem for partners having to rotate off of clients and they move into new states. There is a mobility effort going on right now across the country for CPAs, and 45 states have passed this. 3 have passed limited mobility, so they'll only accept the CPA licensure from certain other states. Um, but the author's going to say that without congressional mandate, it's unlikely that mobility will receive nationwide acceptance. There's just always going to be some of the states that won't accept other states' licensures. And then it also goes on to give an example, and it says that there is an accountant that deals in, I think it says 5 different states, and each one has a different CPE requirement for ethics. And it says that normally a CPA will face about 12 hours of CPE ethics requirements, but this particular CPA, since they have practices in so many different states, is going to be required to have about 22 hours of CPE on ethics alone. The authors round out the article with a lot of proposed models for ethics CPE based on research from other authors. And one of them is Thorne, and Thorne goes to say that moral development, virtue, sensitivity, prescriptive reasoning, ethical motivation, and ethical character are all considered essential dimensions in effective ethics training. And then they quote Melee in his writings and say that there are 4 essential components: moral sensibility, moral judgment, moral motivation, and moral virtues. So between these two authors that they've quoted, there's a lot of similarities, but there's some minute differences in what they feel would be a great model for ethics CPE. And then the authors say that all but developing the propensity to do what is right can be taught, according to most authors. So I think what they're trying to get across to the reader here is that you can give them all the knowledge they need to make the right decision, but you cannot teach what is actually right and wrong just based off of individuals' beliefs. They have to kind of come up with their own decision what is right and wrong. And going on with the proposed model for ethics CPE, they say that coverage of the rules is not enough. You actually have to dive deeper into the rules to make ethics CPE more efficient. And the pedagogy needs to be experientially based with active participation. So what they are alluding to is that current ethics CPE is kind of, you sit there, you listen to what the instructor is teaching. It's more just coverage of the rules, but it needs to be actual situations that you're taught, and the person that is taking the ethics CPE course needs to be involved so they'll actually learn what they need to learn. And then it goes on to say instructional personnel must have the skills to effectively conduct experiential learning. And so the authors are trying to display to the reader that just because an instructor is considered an instructor, they still need to know what they're talking about so they can convey the message to the people taking the course, and they can explain it to them in a way that they'll actually learn. And that's all I have.